Hello, and welcome back to Lord of Heroes on Nyris Gaming. Sorry for the dry spell, there hasn't been a lot of news, at least not that's worthy of making videos lately, and IRL work has gotten quite busy lately. But now we have a lot to talk about today, so let's get into it. So the vast majority of today's news is hero balances. This is going to be for all of these heroes listed here. They're gonna have some quite lovely things. Starting off, we have Fire Helga, and her change is going to be her S1 initially attack selected enemy, 60% chance to reduce their attack power for 1 turn. Instead, that's going to have a 2-turn attack power debuff, and instead of getting extra damage at level 6, it's another 10% debuff chance for a final chance of 80%, which is quite solid. Next is Fire Beretta, the paid fire striker. Both her S1 and S2 are receiving changes. Let's look at this. Her S1 initially, attack selected enemy fills the user's action gauge by 25%. 50% chance for her luck to kick in and increase all allies' action gauges by 25%. And at level 6, that before increase the action gauge gain by 5%. Now that 5% is going to be default. It's going to be another increase of 10% at rank 6. So this is going to come out to 40% total by the end instead of 30, and start out at 30, which makes her oddly a semi-team boosting striker, which is welcome, but not what you would traditionally see in a striker. Her S2 before increased her attack power and defense by 2 turns, 77% chance for her luck to kick in and increase all allies' speed for 2 turns. Now it does all of that the same, but it also gives her an extra turn. So just massive, just additional feature. So she's going to be hitting much more frequently with her too. Speaking of paid fire strikers, we have Fire Rosanna as well. Her S1 and S2 are getting buffed. So her S1, 80% chance to increase the user's speed for 1 turn, and her level 4 and 6 brought that up to 90 and 100% chance to increase your speed. Now, it's just going to guarantee increase your speed. You don't have to worry about a chance of it not happening unless you max it out, which is nice. But if you do max it out, it's going to increase it for 2 turns instead of 1. And it's going to get an extra 10% damage on that level 4. S2. So this initially was a 4-turn cooldown, generates a shield for all allies based on the user's attack power for 2 turns. Level 6 brought that down to the 3 turns. Now it starts at 3 turns and improves the shield instead. Otherwise, it is exactly the same. So that's nice to not have to get that to max rank just to get it down to 3 turns. Now we're getting into some very free-to-play characters who were in much dire need of changes because they were not the greatest. Starting off with Fire Mailing. Her 1 and her 2 are getting buffed. Her 1 initially, attack selected enemy, 50% chance to reduce the damage they deal for 1 turn. And rank 6 would increase the effect duration to 2 turns. So this would only get to a 60% chance, which is at least above 50%, but it was not the most reliable. Now it gets up to a 70% chance, and the 2 turns is just by default. Much more solid. Her S2 started at 5-turn cooldown, and that got reduced by 2 at level 4 and 6. 50% chance to inflict 1 stack of sap damage on each enemy that lasts 1 turn. Now it does the exact same, but additionally has a 50% chance to inflict a wither debuff for 1 turn. So more free-to-play Wither, always welcome to see. Also, these get up to 60% chances, whereas before you would not have any increase in that. For an AoE, that is wonderful. Anything above 50 for an AoE is wonderful to see. On from Fire, we go to Water Sulphate. Her 1 and her 2 are getting changes. Her 1 initially, attack selected enemy, 50% chance to reduce their attack power for 2 turns. Now it has an increase to 60% chance to reduce the attack power, and also has a 40% chance to stun. Not terribly useful in a lot of difficult situations, but it's another effect, so we'll take it. Enter 2. Before it attacks all enemies, 40% chance to inflict stun for 1 turn. Increase the user's attack for 1 turn. And initially, the first rank up would increase the attack duration up by 1. Now that is default, and instead gives 10% damage. So this is much better without any grades. Next water is Water Schneider. He has an increase in his base health from 708 to 722. That's going to happen with a couple more of these. His 1 and his 2, going with that theme lately, are getting changes. Initially, his 1 would attack the selected enemy, 60% chance to remove one of the most recent buffs applied to the enemy. And that would go up to 80 at level 4 and 6. Now it's 80 by default, and it increased the effects removes at max rank. So you could remove 2 at 80% chance. So that is much more effective. His 2 started at a 5-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies, 80% chance to reduce their action gauges by 15%. It is now a default of 4-turn cooldown and 25% action gauge reduction. Still weird that it's a debuffing striker, but he's better than he used to be. Now onto the Earth category, the first one that I am really excited for. Earth Schneider, also a very prominent free-to-play character. You get him very early. He's getting less attack on his base, but more defense. And that will become apparent as to why when we get into all 3 of his things changing here. His new relic, one of them, made Sap Schneider much more viable, and they're making that even more viable now. His 1 initially was attack selected enemy, 60% chance to inflict 1 stack of sap damage that lasts 1 turn. We'll go up to 70 at max rank, which is a big ask just for another 10%. Now it's by default 80% chance and just does more damage. So this is very useful at default rank. That is a very high debuff chance and is very welcome. Much more reliable. As for his AoE, that started at 5-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies, 35% chance to inflict 2 stacks of sap damage on each enemy that lasts 1 turn. This was his best sap applicator for large groups, but it was super unreliable because this debuff chance is very low. Now it is a 4-turn cooldown by default and 50% chance by default. Much, much better. And they're leaning a bit more away from DPS Schneider, because before his burst would attack selected enemy, heal him in proportion to damage dealt, and he gains an extra turn if an enemy dies, which just wasn't happening. So the gain an extra turn if an enemy dies is gone now, and now his burst has a chance to sap for 2 stacks for 1 turn at 50% chance at default. So he now has much more reliable sap on all of his abilities on top of his new relic. Sap Earth Schneider is probably going to be very viable now, going to rival the likes of Dark 9, only Dark 9 provides burst gauge as well. So we'll have to see where we can put this in. The option for Schneider, though, being a warrior, is that he can counterattack with his 1, which is very reliable applicator. And counterattacks just are not good for the most part because of action gauge gain on bosses, but we'll get to something about that later. Moving on to Light, we have Light Walter, paid Light Warrior. His 1 and 2 are getting changes. His 1, attack selected enemy, grants Fury of the Strong for 2 turns. Now, on top of that, they are buffing Fury of the Strong. It gives 5% attack power for every 5% health lost instead of the 3 it used to be. And this also reduces his skill cooldown by 1 turn, his S2, upon a critical hit, which if you're running him as a DPS, should be happening, as I keep saying. So just more effects on his 1 and a stronger buff on his 1. Awesome to see. His 2, 5 turns by default. Attacks all enemies, 80% chance to inflict an electric shock for 2 turns. Shocked foes take 15% more damage. That is going to be exactly the same, but his level 4 and 5 are going to change. Before the level 4 brought it down a turn, now it's 4 by default. So it'll still get down to 3 by the end of all this, but the effect duration will be shifting up a level, and it'll get another debuff chance upgrade, which will push it over to 100% chance. So it'll guaranteedly carry over into the resistance check, which is awesome. Not having to worry about whether it's going to proc in the first place is always welcome. And another free-to-play starter character is getting some changes. Light Johann. He's already gotten some more viability with his relics, and now he's getting buffs on top of it. So to start off, he's getting a base health increase from 830 to 852, and a defense increase from 119 to 125. Pretty much all of the stuff they've been doing to Johann lately have allowed you to lean heavy into his attack stats, whilst all of these changes cover for his defensive necessities. So his 1 and 2 are changing, like most of the rest. Initially, his 1 would attack selected enemy, 45% chance to provoke them for 1 turn, which was never very reliable. Now it is a default of 60% chance to provoke, and this is his warrior counterattack ability as well, so he'll have a much better chance of keeping that provocation applied, but it also grants him a damage resistance buff for 1 turn. So he just becomes more durable just from using his 1. Love to see it. His 2. Initially, this was 4-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies, 50% chance to reduce their attack power for 1 turn. And the effect duration would go up to 2 turns at level 5. Now it's a debuff chance at level 5, bring it up to 60% chance, great for an AoE. And the 2 turns of debuff is just default now. So Light Johann is seeing some much needed changes, and they are looking very good. Now into the dark category. I believe Durahan is our only one. Dark Durahan. 1 and 2. No. 1 and 3. No. 2 and 3. His 1 is not being changed. His 2. Initially, 4-turn cooldown, attack selected enemy, heals him in proportion to damage dealt if it's a crit. Now, it does not need to crit, but it increases his crit hit rate for 2 turns. So he heals him no matter what, and he gets a buff for it. Awesome. His burst, not changing all that much, just default spear cost 3. I don't know if that gets down to a 2 with his upgrades. They don't show them here. I'll have to look at that when we get to him in a character spotlight. Now here, we are done with buffs coming to specific heroes. This is the major change of this update coming on the 24th. Forgot to mention that at the beginning of the video. This update happens on the 24th. But this one. Changes to the action gauge gain of bosses. Normally, this would happen whenever they took an instance of damage. So that would be getting hit by assists. That would be 2 separate instances of damage, and therefore 2 action gauge increases. Counterattacks would do it. This is why counterattacks, warriors with their revenge sets just were not very viable, and you would run non-counterattack sets on them. But now the action gauges will not increase from revenges, assists, or blitz. So now you will not be punished for using these, which is very nice to see, and will bring warriors much more into the meta, especially ones like Schneider with all the sap he can put on to bosses now. That's a nice free-to-play option for sap. And other characters like Earthlafless, who will now not increase the action gauge of like the raid boss nearly as much. And since he is already one of the best DPSs in the game, this just makes him indirectly even better. So anytime he gets extra hits in with counterattacks, giving him his leech buff and dealing more damage, it's not punishing the entire squad during the raid by making the monster take a turn faster. After all that, we have major changes coming to the Silent Straits. So some of the main complaints with the Silent Straits is that it's very slow, takes a long time, and the rewards are just not worth it. So now, instead of it being do the most damage you can do in 60 turns, it's going to be dropped to 40 turns. So this will decrease the time it takes to do a run of the Silent Straits based on their calculations from approximately 10 minutes to 4 minutes, which will be much easier to pull off and much less burdensome. And so the phases that it goes through, that will only be happening on the weekends now. During the weekdays, it'll only be phase 1. So you won't have to worry about that anymore. And obviously there's going to be adjustments to the rewards and the tiers, because with less turns and faster runs, you're not going to be doing anywhere near as much damage. So here's the table for that, what you need to do to get to each tier. Also, the rewards. As far as I've read this, I believe the probability of most things is going away. You will just guaranteedly get certain things. So like for the basic one, you will be getting one of each of these things guaranteed. So you'll actually be able to use them, get enough of them to use in the store, instead of being like, we did really well, but we got nothing for it. Seems the only ones that can still be 0 are the warped thoracic scales. Those are the ones for the artifact mutations, I believe. Transmutations. But the also lovely thing coming to this, if you've noticed already, you can farm linkstones from this. So this is going to be a solid income of linkstones. You won't get terribly many. You only get 1 for anything not a gold. But at least you have a reliable income of linkstones instead of having to wait for events like Mystic Beast Hunts or ad gifts or the like. Now to some less major game-changing news. The Garden of Blessing theme in the Unity Plaza. That's just going to be permanent now. So you can do that whenever you want. The alchemy banners coming after the update are going to be Fire Ricardo. We'll talk about him later. We're finally having details on him. Waterlyn is going to be coming back as a paid hero, and her alchemy banner will be returning. And Earth Charlotte. We're getting Idle Lyn, which looks adorable and wonderful. Here are the artworks for it. The limited one looks like it's going to be yellow primarily. Here is it in the store. There he is. Avalon Times Hero of the Month. I didn't do that because there were only like 2 pieces of information on that initially. So apologies for that. But here he is. I'm not terribly liking the theme of default element characters, how they appear in the story. Almost all being paid these days, but it is what it is. Let us see here. He's going to be a $27 package, like all the rest these days. We will go into his abilities in a little bit. Like I said, Waterlyn is coming back. She was back with the $45 ones back in the day, so she's still going to be like that. The Awaiting the Eclipse package, which gave you 10 free pulls on limited summon banners, is coming back on the 29th. So this will be $5 for 10 pulls. If you missed out on that before, you can pick it up now. Speaking of Mystic Beasts earlier, we're getting our Grundle Hunt starting on the 27th through June 9th. Here are the Beast Count rewards. Pretty standard. And our shop options. So it's going to be primarily Linkstones, Mystic Soulstone, and a lot of alchemy tickets. So it's going to be a full 30 alchemy tickets by the look of this. So that's 33 pulls on alchemy banners and a full 500 link stones. So a full 10 pull on a banner for summoning. You got another 500 crystals, a million gold, and 250,000 renown. And the runes are going to be light and dark for this hunt. On to the events. We have paid to upgrade starting on May 26th and June 2nd. Conquer the Silence, which will be very relevant with the changes, will start on May 24th. Once you start getting into the new Silent Straits, you can get some free tickets daily for this and a few thousand renown. Energetic Efforts will be coming back up on the 5th. Add Gifts is going to be going back to Temporal Threads. Personally, I find this a little disappointing. I was liking the Link Stones, but it's coming back on the 31st. Daily Battle Training will be coming back, and here's where you'll be getting your Link Stones from. This is number of battles fought pretty much anywhere, starting on the 24th. And this is daily resetting. You'll be getting enough Link Stones for one pull and then some every 2 days. Now that we've gotten all that out of the way, we have to look at Fire Ricardo's abilities. Here are his level 1 and level 60 stats. He's a very balanced character stat-wise. Nothing too terribly high, but nothing too terribly low. And this is new. They gave us his level 1 and level 6 S1. So his level 1 S1 attacks selected enemy, 80% chance to reduce target's attack power for 2 turns. Wonderful with those new warrior changes, so he's going to be reducing attack power if he counterattacks. Guaranteedly, if he gets to level 6, 100% chance to reduce target's attack power for 2 turns. Also gains an 80% chance to steal one of the target's most recent buffs. So he can remove buffs and give them to himself, which is also really lovely on a counterattacker, especially with those changes. His 2, cooldown 4 turns, fills burst gauge by 156. Attacks all enemies. If the attack is a crit, increases the attack power and critical hit rate of the user and the ally with the highest attack power for 2 turns. So, pocket buffer for your DPS. And his burst, which is oddly adorable considering who he is and his personality. Starts at 4, attacks all enemies, deals 7% more damage for every buff on the user, and ignores defense if the attack is a critical hit. Feels like you're going to be using this if you're running him more as a DPS himself, which it can be more viable given he gets passive crit rate, and he gets extra damage to earth enemies. That is going to do it for Lord of Heroes news today. Until the next video, I will be seeing you.